I'm on a mission to complete the hardest difficulty on every Call of Duty game, and today I'll be taking on the infamous Call of Duty 3. Released in November 2006, this was the first entry in the series to have both campaign and multiplayer achievements, but for this video I'll just be tackling the single player, ultimately requiring the game to finish on veteran difficulty and then a few miscellaneous things to be mocked up. Thankfully though, there are no collectibles in this one. The campaign is, of course, modelled on the events of World War II, with the player switching between the British, American, Canadian and Polish forces for each leg of the story and combining for a total of 14 missions. The first of these put me in the shoes of the American Army's Private Nichols, and my objectives was to complete basic training, easy enough, and then capture the town of St. Lo. Not so easy. It had been a while since I'd played a Call of Duty game and recording this, and a few things quickly made themselves clear. Feathering the left trigger to take advantage of the aim assist is just as broken as ever and should definitely be abused, and I was also going to have to work pretty hard for my checkpoints as they are really not very frequent. And on top of that, Call of Duty 3's grenade returning mechanic is hard work for someone used to their later titles, pressing X to pick them up and then right bumper to throw them again. At least that's what the prompt tells you to do, because I actually discovered after finishing the game that you can just press RB for both like we all used to, so that's great. And finally, whilst not as ridiculously punishing as Call of Duty 2, this one still really doesn't like it when you accidentally friendly fire. But ultimately, this opening mission wasn't all that difficult, clearing out the graveyard and church, then being introduced to this hand-to-hand quick-time event which may have felt new and exciting in 2006, but not quite so much now. It's not the only questionable mechanic found in this game either, but I'll get to that later. And after that, I marked targets for a tank to destroy and finally held off a counter-attack after capturing a German outpost. There's a few holdout sections like this dotted throughout the campaign, but they all seem to be time-based, so the best strategy I found was just to sit in the corner and wait for it all to blow over. And with the first of 14 missions ticked off, I unlocked my second achievement for completing a level whilst being hit less than 30 times. Unfortunately for me, the smooth sailing ended nearly as quickly as it had started, as I found myself repeatedly failing to get up this hill during mission 2, getting close to the top on one occasion, but mostly not even getting round the corner. On the plus side, I did unlock Purple Heart for dying and retrying 20 times, although for my mental health at that point, I thought I should take a break. And that proved to be a good choice, as when I did build up the strength to try again, I managed to reach the barracks at the top, and despite the extreme fear of dying and being sent all the way back to the bottom, successfully took out the remaining enemies and got my next checkpoint. Another thing that I noticed was that, to me at least, the AI did seem a bit more useful in this game compared to Call of Duty 2 for example, but they were actually making a bit of an effort to push up and not leave me to do 100% of the work. Don't get me wrong, you're still going to have to carry 95% of the weight, but it's noticeable just having them there to distract if nothing else. And the mission ends with a series of bunkers that all need to be cleared out in one go, as there is no checkpoint from here. After navigating the hill, I had a new lease of life and pushed through a few failed attempts up to the roof, and to my next achievement for completing 2 missions as an American soldier. I'd like to say that things got easier after that, but actually I think it just got worse and worse. Something I've learned after years of playing Call of Duty is that whenever an objective involves destroying flak 88s, you know that chances are you're in for a bad time, and this was no different. Again, it all really just comes down to the fact that you have to move through the trenches and take out all 3 without dying, or you'll get sent back to the beginning, which happened to me for near enough 1 hour straight, including a couple of extra painful deaths within sight of the 3rd flak. And this is the first British mission, and there's about 20 minutes worth of stuff before even reaching this part, but it's really not worth discussing when compared to the suffering that this section caused. There's also the completely unnecessary mechanic for planting charges, but at least they got rid of that for the games that came after. And there are a lot of enemies standing between you and the objectives, including a couple that are up and out of the trenches firing down from seemingly nowhere, and others that just decide to appear behind you for the fun of it. Ultimately, it was the trusty smoke grenade which proved to be the biggest help in getting into the final trench, and another example of the AI being good teammates as they pushed forward once I reached a certain point, allowing me to clear out the last enemy, get the charge planted on the final gun, and to my relief, see this checkpoint pop up. The mission then ends with an escape out of the area by truck, and I questionably unlocked the big air achievement for rolling off this tiny ledge. Either way, another one ticked off, but still many more to go. I was back to Private Nichols now for the Mayenne Bridge level, and thankfully there was nothing particularly noteworthy to talk about in this one, but it still ended up taking nearly 1 hour. The objective ultimately is to defend your allies. He defuses a very heavily guarded bomb planted on the bridge, and there's lots to get through before reaching that point, but nothing that a few attempts couldn't see me through, and before too long I was back to the pain and suffering as another pretty tough one follows. Stepping into the shoes of the Canadian Army for the first time, pretty much the entirety of the 5th mission takes place in a small industrial area. First having to clear out the enemies from each corner, which is not too difficult because there's a set amount, but then blocking 3 of the entrances into the site, which is a bit of a nightmare due to the fact that each one has infinite soldiers spawning and pouring in. Again, don't expect a checkpoint until you've sorted all 3, and once more, smoke grenades will probably save the day. The final objective is defending against a counter-attack, but unfortunately there was only so much powering in the corner I could do before I had to make myself useful. First destroying a Panzer from the safety of the building, but then having to take out a Tiger by planting a charge on it, which I spent a while trying to build up the courage to run at it and set, but thankfully the mission kind of just awkwardly ends as soon as the charge has been planted. And at this point, I now had 5 of the 14 complete and a total playtime of just over 5 hours, so I definitely wasn't getting through the game quickly. Next up was Fuel Plant. This one begins with fighting through the loading station and clearing a path through the facility to the security area. Here, I was able to access the gate controls and ultimately plant the charges on the fuel tanks. To anyone planning on playing this, I would really recommend saving your smoke grenades for the furnace room, as I can see this being one of the trickiest sections in the entire game. The enemies are constantly spawning on the walkways above you, and the only way forward is running up this one set of stairs and head first into the danger. I managed to get out without any smokes after only about 20 minutes, which isn't too bad, but I got a sense that this room definitely has some serious trauma potential. And once up and out of there, it was into the escape vehicle to make a hasty getaway, and I unlocked the British Commando achievement for finishing 2 levels as a British soldier. And finally, I was now onto a mission that didn't take me an hour to complete, and all from the comfort of a vehicle. The Black Baron is the first Polish mission, and the objective here was to chase down and kill a tank commander who goes by the same name. If you've made it this far, you're not going to have any troubles with this, although I did still have a few deaths from playing a bit too aggressive. But overall, I only spent 15 minutes or so on this one, and then sadly had to go on foot again. Following that was the forest, where I had to retake the trenches, destroy the ammo storages, and ultimately clear out the forest itself. The end of this level is another potential sticking point, and somewhere you should definitely pay attention to the prompts on screen to avoid what happened to me. After crossing the battlefield and clearing the final bunker, I had to take control of the mortar and destroy the vehicles blocking the road. The first problem is that whilst the game doesn't say it, you're pretty much under a time limit to get it done before getting overwhelmed by the attacking German troops, who eventually make it impossible to even peek out of the trench, let alone operate the mortar. The second problem is that said mortar is not aimed by simply moving the thumbsticks, and instead they need to be rotated. I missed this bit first time around and couldn't for the life of me figure out what I was meant to be doing when under the pressure of the onrushing enemies, leading to inevitable death and being sent back to the other side of the battlefield. The checkpoints in this game are really brutal. Second time round, I had some extremely close scares, not helped by the fear of friendly firing amongst all the chaos, but I did just about survive and get the mission finished. The Laison River level was probably the hardest for me overall, at least it took the longest. Not long after starting, I came face to face with the dreaded flak positions in trenches, and of course there's another 3 of them, and obviously there are no checkpoints to be found until all are dealt with. I feel like this objective alone, especially on veteran, warrants an entire level itself, but unfortunately there's quite a bit more after, clearing out and pushing through a motor pool before reaching a very heavily armed house with another 88 out the back. It's not overflowing with infinitely respawning enemies like the houses in Call of Duty 2, but it's still pretty bad. There's just a lot to deal with, including those hidden away out back, and I had a painful failure after emptying the house but getting killed the first time I got out the other side. But I learned my lesson and took the next one extremely slow, crawling into the flak position, and after 90 odd minutes, finishing the mission and unlocking the Canadian Highlander achievement. So I was slowly making my way through the campaign and onto the 10th mission now, and thankfully a bit of an easier one compared to the last couple. Although it does start in rather dramatic fashion as the squad run for cover as mortars rain down all around. There was then a series of partially destroyed buildings to fight through and clear out before reaching the main objective, capturing the crossroads. Overall, there's a lot to deal with, but again, nothing that was particularly challenging, especially after some of the stuff that's been dealt with up to this point. Shout out though to this guy who spawned in out of thin air like the Terminator and proceeded to murder me. Definitely a good example of the kind of thing you'll be dealing with when playing this game. But even that BS couldn't hold me back, as I did a mix of making myself useful, picking enemies off, and also just hiding away from trouble and letting my allies do the hard work. Eventually, I reached the point that I could join them outside for the final stand, and we pushed the enemy troops back, capturing the crossroads and signaling the end of another level. The 11th mission is Hostage, where the main goal is to save Major Ingram and later several French resistance fighters. It's also the last time the player takes control of Britain's James Doyle. And if you're not playing on veteran and just storming through, this would probably be the longest level because there's a fair amount to get done. I started on a mounted machine gun, mowing down all in my path, before the truck is ambushed and I have to go on foot to find and rescue the Major. After that, there's some driving to do between 3 different locations and houses to clear in order to rescue the remaining hostages. And again, whilst these can still be a bit painful due to the lack of checkpoints that are so rampant in this game, having suffered through Call of Duty 2's house clearing sections and battling the waves and waves of enemies spawning in closets, it doesn't feel so bad this time round. There was also a comical moment where the Jeep parked itself against a wall, and when I reloaded the checkpoint after dying, it instantly crushed one of the AI companions. Whilst funny, I was a bit annoyed that I just lost a meat shield and extra firepower, but luckily, he reappeared not too long after. With everyone rescued, I've reached the final firefight of the British campaign, and most of the time in this area can be spent cowering behind cover, but sadly, I did have to eventually move and provide support from the resistance as she plants a charge on an armoured vehicle. Unfortunately, said charge explodes early, taking her out in the blast, but no time to be sentimental as the end of the game was starting to come into sight. Next up was the final Canadian mission, the Corridor of Death, which sounds very dramatic, but it was actually one of the quickest for me, taking just under 40 minutes or so, which compared to how the rest of the game had gone up to this point was basically a speed run. The trickiest section I found was near the beginning of the level, having to push through this open yard area and into the first houses. Looking back at my footage, it only took me about 10 minutes, but I think the fact I was pretty much dying every 10 seconds made it feel like I was there for a lot longer. With that successfully navigated, we had to work our way up through the town, taking out a couple of MG positions to get to the tavern where, you guessed it, there's another holdout section. This one was made slightly more interesting as I had to deal with a few mortar crews before they flattened the building, but once they were dealt with, I chilled on the upper floor, defending the attack, and then moved to another house along the street and into the basement, where a load of ammo was being stored. The final act of the Canadian missions was planting charges on the barrels in here, which detonated an explosion big enough to take out the nearby enemy tanks and also clear a path to send reinforcements to the Polish troops stranded on Hill 262. And speaking of Hill 262, that is where I'll tell you to next for the penultimate mission and the last of the Polish campaign. This one can be broken up quite nicely into 3 parts. Firstly, a short demolition job in a tank, very easy. Second is a big push through a couple of trench areas, very hard. And lastly, the defense of the hillside bunker, which is somewhere in between. The trench section took me around 20 minutes to get through and had a mix of areas that I navigated by either running and gunning or slowly dragging myself along the floor hugging the wall of a trench. I definitely found this first part to be the hardest though, as you're more out in the open with just the odd barrel for cover, and when I did finally make it past this group of enemies, I saw my life flash before my eyes as I came under attack from a rogue enemy whilst reloading. And after a few attempts at crawling to safety through the next trench area, I'd made it to the hillside bunker. And the first thing I had to do here was mark artillery targets to take out the surrounding tanks, and then pretty much just wait for the reinforcements to arrive. The only tricky bit was getting into this little bunker area to get a Panzerschreck and destroy the nearby tank. With that taken care of, the backup arrived, signalling the end of the level and the Polish tanker achievement. And that finally brings me to the last mission in Call of Duty 3. And this one starts with the defense of the front lines and preventing the town from being overrun, and there are a few mounted machine guns dotted around, but getting on those is basically a death wish on veteran, so should definitely be ignored. Eventually enemy tanks start to appear and destroy the cover, so the call to retreat comes in and we pulled back to the next rally point to the southern side of town. And here you're faced with a fair amount of enemy armour, so an airstrike would go down a treat, but unfortunately the radio's been shot to pieces, so instead one of our squad goes in with flares to mark targets. He inevitably gets shot in the leg, and guess whose job it is to go help get him back. Whilst we both made it out of that alive, another one of the squad isn't quite so lucky. But on the plus side, I was now heading towards the final checkpoint of the campaign. I made this journey through the town much harder than it should have been, as on more than one occasion I cleared out the entire street only to die to a remaining straggler at the entrance of the church. But third time lucky, I made it through to the northern edge where my final objectives were to clear out the house, eliminate the mortar teams, and finally destroy the armoured vehicles. There's some bazooka ammo laying around, but in the end I used the anti-tank gun mostly, despite being a bit scared of using it at first. You can take a lot more damage than I expected whilst on it, so just remember to aim it by rotating the thumbsticks and you should be all good. And with the final tank taken care of, air support arrives to take the glory, but most importantly, signal the end of the campaign. Up popped another 2 achievements for finishing every level of the story, and also finishing it all on veteran difficulty. And I can safely say, I'll never be doing that again. I now had the hardest achievement ticked off and a big weight off my shoulders, but there was still some single player mopping up to do. There were 7 achievements remaining for completing various miscellaneous tasks, but a lot of them could be effectively taken care of at the same time. I loaded up the mission The Island, although this probably could have been any mission really, and playing on the easiest difficulty now, just proceeded to run through whilst only using grenades and melee. I did, however, pick up a German weapon along the way and also kept hold of the assault rifle that you spawn into this mission with, and you'll see why in a moment. Being in recruit difficulty obviously means you can be a lot more carefree, however it still is possible to die, and I came extremely close in this bunker near the end of the level. Luckily I survived that close call and I made it to the top of the bunker, finishing the mission and unlocking 3 achievements for a mighty 150 gamer score. And those were for using less than 300 rounds of ammo, not dying or using a checkpoint, and also not firing a shot at all. And now there's a nice little trick you can do, which is also where those 2 guns I held onto come into play. By restarting from the last checkpoint after those achievements pop, but before the mission properly ends, I was able to do the last section again, but this time using the Kar 98. And upon reaching the end, I unlocked another 2 achievements for using only a bolt-action rifle and only a German weapon during a mission. And then once more using the bar this time for the Assault Trooper achievement. That left me with just 1 single player achievement left to unlock, requiring 5 grenades to be picked up and thrown back. The description doesn't actually say this, but they all need to be in the same mission. So I was looking online for a good spot to do it, and that's when I discovered that you can press RB to both pick up and throw back, rather than X first like the on-screen prompt tells you. Better late than never, I guess. Either way, this is easily done during the training mission because you can just pick up and throw the same grenades and also have an infinite spawn right in front of you. So only a minute or 2 after loading in, the hot potato achievement was mine. That put me at 17 out of 26 achievements unlocked for a total of 575 gamer score. But unfortunately, everything that I've left involves the online multiplayer, and considering this game is nearly 20 years old, that's going to require some serious boosting, which I may well do one day, but for now, I'm happy to conquer veteran and everything else single player and leave it at that. Overall, this is definitely up there with the hardest Call of Duty campaigns in my opinion, taking me about 13 hours to complete all of this. And whilst it doesn't really have those standout sections that seem completely beyond insanity, like some found in Call of Duty 2 or World at War, this game is noticeably stingy of its checkpoints, meaning you're often having to navigate some pretty substantial parts of the missions before reaching another save point. But maybe I'm just bad and you think I'm wrong, so let me know how you found it if you've also suffered through it, and where you'd rank it amongst the other Call of Duty titles. As for me though, I've now finally finished unlocking every COD campaign achievement from the 360 era, so I'm going to need some more goals. I already have a few new games on the go or planned, but leave a comment if there's something specific you'd like to see from me in the future. And until then, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.